You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello, hello. Welcome to the show. Today I'm joined by Dr. Laura Schwinn, a clinical psychologist specializing in supporting women who feel they have lost their own vibrancy within the transition of becoming a mother. Yeah, I can relate to that. Clients that resonate with Dr. Laura's approach are high-achieving, open-minded, curious explorers with a propensity towards holistic health and attachment-style parenting. For more than a decade, Dr. Laura has worked with a vast array of clients with a central theme that all people seek and crave two things: to be heard and to be seen. From this place, clients are invited into a safe space with a dependency on the therapeutic process and in her ability to hold the client's vulnerability so that they may soften and expand into their fullness. Ooh, I love it. Okay, so today we talk about how Dr. Laura helps mothers reconnect with their vibrancy. Dr. Laura also shares her personal experiences as a mother and highlights the challenges and pitfalls that mothers often face today. We also discuss the importance of letting go of control in motherhood and focusing on internal states and feelings in achieving our goals, and just so much more. I won't keep you from it another second. Here's Dr. Laura. Hey, Dr. Laura. So nice to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's chat.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. I usually like to start by getting to know you a little bit better and why you do what you do. So, why become a psychologist? What led you
R-
to that path?
Right. I love this question because for me, it's not about that title that, let's say, defines me,
Mm-hmm.
but that has been kind of my person, and it's just kind of wraps into that title, if you will, ever since I was little. I loved thinking about things. I loved like understanding, not even understanding, it was just being curious, like my own thoughts, like obviously my own immediate family, but like, why do people do what they do? Like how does this all happen? What is the driving force? What makes us respond in a certain way? An interesting note is that I'm an identical twin. And I think that's part of it. Like, why am I like this? And how you're having a very different experience than I'm having right now.
Yeah, totally.
You
Yeah.
know, so I was always I still am the person that asks a lot of questions that are like, why, huh? Help me understand. I don't understand this, or can you help me see it a different way? So all of that sort of unfolded and led me to the path that I'm on.
Yeah. No, I can imagine I think I would be the same way if I was a twin. But what I'm thinking about is, like just the different personality types, right? Like if my husband was a twin, he'd see his twin doing things and be like, cool, man, good for you. Like there would be,
Right.
and not that I mean, I don't know, that might be like downplaying, downplaying it a little bit, right? But yeah, it's like get to
Yeah.
the bottom of why I am having this reaction and you are not, especially since you're going through so many of the same things at the same time.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Anything about growing up as a twin that is, I mean, obviously unrelated to what I would be interviewing about, but like just out of curiosity, I don't know that I don't know many twins, like
Sure.
anything that might surprise us to know, or any misconceptions that you want to clear up about what like twin life is like?
Sure. I think probably the most question that I've ever got in my life is like, can I like, do we have the same thought at the same time?
Mm,
Perhaps that happens to other just siblings or other people, and perhaps twins. I don't think that's the standard. That wasn't my experience, or wasn't our experience. I
yeah.
couldn't think what she was thinking at any time. We didn't have a secret language. Um,
Okay.
that was a common question.
Yeah.
I think some oddities after we moved apart, and we were together for a little bit. 1 year in college we were together, but for the most part, after we left the house, we did our own thing. And so when we would come back for holidays or gatherings and whatnot, a handful of times we would be wearing very, very similar things.
That's
And
wild.
so
Yeah.
that was kind of like like, hey, or like, I have something just like that, or like,
Yeah.
and we hadn't seen each other in a while. So
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know what your experience is, but I feel like things like that, like, I'm not surprised about that. It's like there's some sort of wavelengthy thing, whether it's twins or not. I find that
right.
even my mom, when I remember growing up, when they would go out to dinner on Saturday or whatnot with their best friends, they would always like the moms would always coincidentally show up in like the very similar outfits. It's like if you spend enough time with someone,
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
and that's sort of that's even downplaying what I originally meant. I do think there's some like woo-woo thing that happens between
I'm all
people,
about the woo woo. It's all cool.
right?
Yeah, we can go
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, of
like I
course. It's
do
all
think there
energy. Yeah.
is something there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Or it's just even like, not only time spent together, but then like the thinking, the anticipation. But again, that to me is not on the conscious level, which is exactly what I'm talking about. Like why I'm in where I'm at. Like it's
yeah,
not the things that are like the obvious, like why do I do what I do? But it's also like, how did this develop? Where did this come from? Like, it's
yeah.
kind of like demystifying, or even maybe just putting language around the woo woo.
Yes, yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay. All right, so off air, I asked your preference on your name on
Mhm.
Dr. Laura, Dr. Schwinn, and you made a comment like the doctor thing, we can go there. What did you mean by that? Tell me more.
So, by no means am I downplaying like my education, or like having earned this title. That's not what I mean. And I think sometimes, especially being a woman holding um that level of education, some people are more feminine, or like you should be called that. I'm not like stuck on that. And I think it's important, especially for somebody being in a mental health position, or even just doctor in general, when somebody, let's say, comes to talk to me, or talks to any doctor, it's, yes, you want them to be an expert in their field. So there is that sort of uh, authority that somebody might be seeking, right? And I think it's really important that the provider isn't caught up in that title, because otherwise all you're doing is going to somebody that you're thinking that they're going to tell you what to do. Meaning, in mental health particular, now I'm not talking about like in a medical doctor position, but you sort of already set the stage as a disadvantage, right? Like you're disempowering the person to really know themselves, to explore themselves.
Interesting.
My
Hmm.
perspective.
Okay. Okay. It's one that I hadn't heard before. Certainly, I think like you said, interviewing mostly female mental health professionals, doctor or not. Yeah, but there's definitely an emphasis on it. But that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah. So
Um, hmm, I hadn't thought about that before. Because when you think about if you go to a medical doctor, I'm not gonna do surgery on myself.
of course, right. But you're
Right.
you're going because you want to
Right.
get an expert's opinion of, is this possible? And then hopefully you would have a dialogue about why you're doing it and how many successes they've had, or what, right? I
Right,
mean,
right,
so
right,
that makes
right.
sense.
A little
Um,
more trackable, I think, in that way.
well, it also, yeah, I mean, and we tend to make at least conventional medicine like it's almost like really objective. It's less personal. I mean, it
Yes.
feels personal, but it's, you know what I'm saying? It's
No, it
like about
doesn't.
it's about the procedure, right? As
Right.
opposed to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So in the domain of like mental health, when we're talking about like emotional regulation, right, or dysregulation, is usually why you're coming to see a provider.
Mhm.
And I think, at sometimes we're already like the receiver, the client is already feeling vulnerable, right? You're asking for help,
Yeah.
and that's great. and I don't want to contribute to that even unconsciously
Yes.
as like another weight. Make
Gotcha.
sense?
Yes, it does. Okay. All right. So then, what inspired you then to specialize in working with supporting women and moms in particularly that
Yeah.
motherhood lane?
Right? Which is like the lane forever. I mean, once you birth kids, whether they're even like biologically yours or not,
Right.
and I think also the concept of motherhood so far extends beyond not only biological mothers, but like let's say surrogate parents or adoptive parents, step parents. I like to call them bonus parents. I'm also a bonus parent.
Hmm.
Um, but even like, even if you don't actually have any kids of your own, it's just that motherhood that the
Mm.
feminine, not only pertaining to female anatomy people, but the feminine embodies, right?
Uh-huh.
And so for me, that interest was again when I was little and noticing, my mom, and it was just my sister and I growing up, and just noticing that she could have used help or even like the support. And she had the luxury to stay at home with us while my father worked, and that was beautiful.
I'm sorry. That's just like, I don't mean to laugh through everything you say. Just like, and just noticing she could have used help. It's like, yeah,
Right? But
what an
like,
idea.
what an idea, but it not like help like, like a nanny. Like she
Right.
needed a community, she needed friends, she needed other women to be around her, like, or to talk about stuff,
Yeah.
just, or maybe it's what I'm really, maybe she was lonely is what I'm recognizing, or
Mm.
disconnected. And just noticing that was, I don't want to say hindered by kids, but that impacted either maybe her ability to feel like she could leave the house
Yeah.
to go do her own thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Have you connected with her now as an adult and kind of gone
Yeah.
back and asked her perspective on that?
Yes. And I love my mom. I love her, and she loves in the best way that she knows how.
Mm.
And being reflective on that is not a natural muscle she flexes.
Got it. Okay. Okay. And I'm curious, and if you don't mind sharing this, the last I'll push you on the people
That's
that
good.
aren't you. But does your twin share a lot of the same feelings on looking back, or is she see it differently too?
Oh, that's interesting. She sees it differently.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. It's like fascinating, right? Like
yeah,
that's why you're here and what you do, because
yeah,
that's fascinating. You have three people under the same roof, two of which are identical twins
yeah.
and have three different perspectives on what happened in the same
Mhm.
household. Like that is, yeah.
I know.
Okay.
Isn't it wild?
It
I know.
is wild. It's wild, and they're all valid in their own way, right? Like it's
Absolutely. And I think that's I actually, I mean, to whatever you want to include this, I'm absolutely fine. But that came, it was actually me separating from that, because part of that is that I got way too entangled in that. I
got it.
felt very emotionally responsible for everybody, especially the women in the house. So,
Hmm.
and at some point that was too much, and I did not, without being out of it, I didn't know how to modify that. But once I got out, and that was really key for me. And now when I go back in, I can totally be present and be me and not be wrapped into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious as now I wonder is does now that title that you have, does that do you think that that has any impact on how they view the situation? Is
Of
that
course.
maybe why you're a little bit like, "Hey,
Well,
don't let this title like scare you off," kind of thing?
right. Um, the title thing actually came from listening to the work of Dr. Stephen Porges. I don't know if you're familiar with him. So he's
I'm
kind of
not,
been
but
the,
I read it on your site.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he's been like if you listen to anything, he just is like so calm, so soothing, so knowledgeable.
Mm.
Anyways, what his work has been focusing it on was actually in laboratory work in the polyvagal nervous system. So this is where all this polyvagal and kind of just regulating the nervous system has really stemmed from, particularly in clinical work. And so I had been listening to something, and he mentioned, that when we even go and somebody with an authority title, so like doctor, at least in the Western society, has already been conditioned to think that then that person is the expert on themselves.
Yeah.
When in reality, you're your own expert, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But back to your question with the family, yes, I think that's where, oh, you're shrinking me, so if I ask any of those questions, and if we're not in a heightened state, I can say, listen, I've always been like this. I've
Yeah.
always asked you these questions.
Right.
And why are you attributing that to me now? Because I went to school for some years. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll take you off the hot seat for a second. I appreciate you
Sure.
answering my probing questions. It's funny because I am that person as well, particularly with my friend group. I tend to kind of like leave my family alone for the most part, but with my friend group, I'm the one that sits down and is like, I don't care about your yoga class yesterday. I want to hear about your marriage, like what's
Right.
going
Yeah.
on. And my
Yep.
husband's always saying, you should just go back to school, go get your degree, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, because then I wouldn't be able to ask those questions. Then they're going to think that I am trying to psychoanalyze them. And I kind of am, but I'm doing it in a very like loving, I'm genuinely interested kind of way. And I'm at this point, because I'm not actually psychoanalyzing them, I'm not trained. It is just a genuine
Yeah.
curiosity, like you
Hmm.
said, but
Hmm.
it does I could see how it would change things. It would be like, "Ooh, what are we doing here? What's happening?"
Absolutely. And I've had friends
Right.
that, that met me, when I've already had this title. And at
Mhm.
first that was off-putting. I've also had that be kind of like the reason that people have been drawn to me.
Uh,
So it's again
how
kind
do
of,
you manage that? Like, how does that make you feel?
does that make you feel? That's a beautiful. I
Like
love it that
an
you just
accident,
asked me that. That's
total accident. I really did not mean that as it came out.
beautiful.
Like,
There
is
are
that
no accidents, Christy. There are no
I
accidents in
know,
life.
I know.
Right.
How does that make you feel? I can't believe I'm
Um, Now it feels, I feel empowered by it,
okay.
because I can read and understand the difference. I mean, not like I'm perfect, but I can get a better sense, right? Because before it sort of felt like, why are you drawn to me? Because I'm curious, and like I have a better control of like my energetic being. And
Got it.
so if you're coming toward me, I can get the sense, or like, oh, are you really wanting something from me? Because
Mhm,
I am
mhm.
this professional? Okay, that's a different conversation. Are you wanting something more on a personal level to connect? Okay, let's go there, right? So I've just become a better reader.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 I could see that. Okay. Okay, and so you have this phrase that you use on your in your, brand, your website, your
Sure.
bio things. You say that you specialize in working with women, moms, adults who have lost their own vibrancy
Mhm,
with the transition of becoming a mother.
mhm.
Say more about what that actually means and how that might manifest for us, because I love this wording of it. Um, I I used to say when I was pregnant and newly postpartum, I was like, I feel like me, but with no caffeine. Like I just feel like
Yeah, you're
half
dulled,
speed. I
right?
feel like me at half speed. And so I resonate with that, and I can, even for myself, I can feel how vibrancy and losing vibrancy would expand well beyond what I just said. But I'm just curious from your point of view, why choose that wording? How do you see it manifest? And just say more, please, about that.
Yeah. That's a beautiful question. Um, the word just came to me, so I can't say that it was like deeply thought. It was, this seems right.
Yeah.
This seems, um, because, I think other words sort of then we get into the stigma of like a shame or blame, or I should or I shouldn't feel this way. And really what also my essence is that we are all vibrant beings,
Mm,
and then life tends to want to turn us down.
yeah.
And I think particularly motherhood, when this innate response is to care for this other person. Obviously we need attachment, and to do that as well. I'm not
Hmm.
diminishing the importance of that.
Hmm.
um, and we also need to come back to our own vibrancy, our own light, so we can be more attuned to the attachment of our child
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
other people, not even our child, but, attachments, period.
Yeah. As you're talking, I was getting a little more clarity on why I think it hits so well for me is that when you said like a lot of the other terms and phrases touch on shame and guilt and the shoulds, I was thinking of the phrases like, "Oh, I've lost myself. I want to bounce back. I want to get back to myself." And I think why this hits is that just those are phrases now to me that I hear and they're all encompassing.
Mhm.
Like it's my whole being. And it's like, is it though? Or is it just a layer of my being?
Right. And the reality, right? I have this image of whatever this little cartoon, right? It's like the caterpillar and the butterfly are talking, and the caterpillar says, like, "I think I'm changing," and the butterfly says, "Well, we're supposed to."
Yeah.
Right? So to me,
Yeah.
the vibrancy is not about something that you lost and left behind, because you are a different person when
Yeah.
you enter into the motherhood, right? You have expanded, you have opened and blossomed. And so it's not about returning to where
Yeah.
you were. That doesn't mean you don't do some of the same things and have some of the same feelings. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more of this more global expansion that I'm talking about, right? That you feel into. And so vibrancy just seems to make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I know you also talk a bit about, modern living and just how motherhood itself has changed in this world that we're living in. The hustle culture, the constant need for productivity and this and that. Like, do you think that the aspects, the challenges of motherhood, if we pull it out from like, hey, potty training's hard, hey, sleep deprivation is hard, and we pull it out and we make it more of like a societal thing, like this is hard on moms. Mom life is hard in this world. Do you think that do you think it is harder now or do you think we just talk about it more?
I don't think, yeah, the level of hardness has changed. I think my perspective is that somewhere, we could get a little bit historical, but that it's more sort of like, post war, is that women started to carry all of the burden, right?
Yeah.
The working, the house cleaning, the keeping it together, then keeping yourself together. So it doesn't,
Yeah.
I don't know that it got any more. It was all of a sudden in our culture. I mean, particularly here in the States, right? And the
Yeah.
Western culture is that the woman is able to do it all.
Yeah. Yeah, we kept getting more and more
Right?
things and not releasing any, right? Like,
Right.
okay, great. Now we can work. Now we can do all these things, but we held on to all of the responsibilities that we had and just kept adding more.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's fun. It's fun that we did that. It's
Right.
good.
Is that great? Right.
Yeah, it's great.
So great. Right. So, I mean, I love that you're like, do we just talk about it more? I do think we talk about it more, although we're not, very few of us are actually doing anything different about it.
Yes. No, I feel that. And I feel that even personally because I had this, the aha of becoming a mom and going like, what is going on here? Like I was raised with the sentiment of yeah, do what you want. You can be anything you want in this world, like girl power. But I realized that this the thing that they tell you in parenting all the time, right? The cliche is that you can talk a kid till they're blue in the face about what they should do, but if they don't see you do it, they're never going to do it. And I was raised with those sentiments being told to me, but what I witnessed was a very old school house that included my mom working her tail off 60 hours a week, but still coming home, dinner, laundry, bath, like she did all of it.
Right. So all
So it
of
was
the
very
house
like
care, all of the
traditional
childcare.
roles.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so I'm sitting here like, wait a minute, what happened to Yaya? What happened to girl power? I'm literally looking at what I grew up in. Like, this is not, no, wait, wait a minute.
Right.
But to
Right.
your point, I'm not really. I'm talking about it a lot. And I'm like, I'm a little bit chipping away, but this is where I see how like long generational changes really take, because the little bit of change that I make from what my mom did feels like a mountain to me, but in reality, it's like this small little hill.
Yeah. Well, but you have to start somewhere.
No, I know.
So,
It is what it
okay,
is at this
it
point. Like
is
I'm not.
right. And my perspective is this: once you have awareness, you can't unhave awareness. So the fact that you're
Uh,
talking about it, right? I, I think that's the foundation of any movement. You
mhm,
have to know your why.
mhm,
And once you have this awareness of saying, wow, there was this huge disconnect between, this empowerment that was verbally exploded at me
mhm,
and the actual reality of what I saw,
mhm,
that impacts me now personally as a mom, as the caretaker, as a partner, as a woman,
mhm,
not as
mhm.
a little girl, right? But as a
Mhm.
woman. And you're recognizing just that there was a disconnect. And
Yeah.
to any extent that you are not only aware of that, but then doing something, even like having podcasts like this, talking
Yeah.
to people about this, right? That is a shift in the direct, in a change.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I was also, just reflecting again. Like I went to a very small um private Catholic high school, all girls, and it was very women empowerment, like be a scientist, do all the sports, do all the arts, do everything. Like we are here to support you. You're gonna go to the best college ever, you're gonna get the greatest da, 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 da. I don't recall, I won't say with certainty, but I don't recall there being any conversation about what happens then when I am this scientist and my husband is still wants me to come home and cook and clean. Like I just that to me feels like such a misstep there. Like I like just using my example of the school I went to, like it was like about raising like these well-rounded women, but didn't touch on anything like I almost wanna say real world. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
Yeah. Well, the reality,
it's a
like, how does this
disservice.
play? Yeah. How does this play out? Because
Yeah,
obviously that's a beautiful thing. We want to empower all people to have all choices and even to
yeah,
expand, to all opportunities. So that's not only, to women, but any kind of um, underprivileged group, right? Um, and yeah, how does that look still while the rest of society is still catching up?
yeah, yeah, okay, alright. Just going off my own little therapy session here.
No, it's great.
Um, so when clients are coming to you with this struggle, right? Like,
Mhm.
what does it look like? How do you start to work with someone to get that vibrancy back? Or what is the I don't even know if I want to say back, but like,
Yeah,
what do we
yeah,
do? What do we start to do?
yeah. The word that I like and I like is to reignite, right? Because it almost
Reignite.
feels like a flame that is not out, but it's just really low,
Okay, I like that.
right?
All right. So what do we do
How do we
about
get
it?
it? Oxygen, right? Well, the
Yeah.
first step is showing up. And so the way I work with people, it's not that I'm different, but I'm going to match you where you're at. And so while I might see some really it's not even about holes, but just some aspects, my intention is to hold space for you to step into that. Because
Mm,
just like you were describing about your high school experience, right? And so there was all this empowerment. And so words are just words, though. You have to feel it to make any kind of real change.
yeah.
So my perspective is that we're going to, at least in my work, in our time together, is to hold that space. One, got to make sure that it's safe, because just like kids, what happens, like, where do we learn best? It's when we're in a state of safety and when we're playful.
Mm,
And so when our nervous system is relaxed and we're relaxed, and so we feel safe, that means we can explore honestly
hmm.
about the stuff that we don't really want to face normally, right? If they're like, yeah, it's not that bad. Oh, actually, I don't really like this. This is actually causing me more tension. So my perspective, and that can range, it kind of depends upon the person of when they feel safe,
Mm,
you
okay.
know, because we can talk about all the hard stuff, right? And somebody might be very good at identifying all those things. but it's not, no change is going to happen until they really embody that, right? And that, like that awareness, like you had talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Okay. So someone listening is like, all right, I'm gonna go get some help. Like, but I think there's still I think there's still a lot of fear around even taking that first step. Like, what advice would you give to someone listening that's like, all right, hearing this and it's clicking about taking that first step?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about having these conversations. It's, and so beyond normalizing, it's that we are all struggling as people on
Yeah,
this planet. It's, particularly post COVID time, whatever,
I
whatever,
know. Whatever
whatever.
we are
Yeah.
now, I know. It's like half and half.
Right. Whatever. In living, right?
Yeah.
We're all struggling. And the more that we can say, hey, um, I want to get some support so I can be my best self, right? And that doesn't mean anything is wrong with you.
Hmm.
That means somewhere along the line, like most of us have had, is that we've been conditioned to be somebody else. We've been conditioned to focus on external factors to regulate our own internal state of being.
Hmm.
And the more that we are just saying, oh, wait, great, I see that. Now, how am I connected to myself? Oh, wow, I'm actually rather disconnected from myself. I want to get more connected to myself,
Hmm.
And so I guess my perspective here is that we all lose ourselves. We all get distracted by the shiny thing, the hard thing, the whatever, right? And it's, how do we just come back to ourself? Because that's really where our glow or vibrancy is, but that's also where our huge creativity is too.
Yeah. Yeah. How has your experience in motherhood, how does that impact the work you do? What do you bring that into it? Or I know like some clinicians
I don't
don't do, like, where
well,
do you
I mean,
see that?
I mean, I'm rarely like sharing stories of like, oh yeah, that happened to me, because that's not what therapy is. It's not, it feels like a friend, but it's not a friend.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
not we're not swapping stories here. Okay.
Yeah. She's my best
Uh,
friend I know nothing about. That's what I always say. Yeah.
exactly. Um, but I do pull from, experiences that I've had, and, my journey as a motherhood is going to look very different from yours, from anyone else's, right? So for
Hmm.
me to presume that there might be some similarities, now of course that doesn't mean that there's not, but in the tangibles, right?
Yeah.
I guess how I use my kiddos, not
We
in
know
an
what you
abusive,
mean.
all right, okay.
We know what you mean.
They are my greatest teachers.
Yeah.
They hit on all the spots that I have either forgotten about or don't want to look at.
Yeah.
So if anything, I use my experience as a mother. So those moments, and then to bring that as like in broad strokes, to the work that I do.
Hmm. How old are your kids?
8 and 5. Almost forgot there for a minute. It's like, how old? Wait, yeah, they're 8 and 5.
I always forget how old I am.
I know. Me too. I'm like, wait.
So 8 and 5.
Mhm.
I'll tell you, those are about the ages that I anticipate. I always joke, and I kind of I've shied away from this joke the more personal development work I've done, but those were kind of the ages that I joked that I would be like stepping into my second peak in life. And like, because, everybody's potty trained, everybody's in school, but they're not quite old enough yet for me to be worried about what they're doing when they're not home and having all the things. And I'm curious, like, is this just like is this a silly dream that I have that those are like really sweet ages? Or like,
I don't
what?
want to burst your bubble. Um, okay, it's not, I mean, but the point is, there's always like hard stuff and easy
In
stuff at
between
all
stream.
ages. Well, it
Yeah.
it depends upon what you're looking for, right? So if you're
I'm just
looking
looking for a
for,
little more time for me.
great. So if that's going to be your perspective, yeah, we can justify that,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Okay.
Or we could, you could reframe it and justify not justify, go after for what it is that you need now rather than waiting for when
I know, we're
external things change.
trying. We're trying.
I got you. And it's way easier said than done. The whole point is like the more that you just are aware of that, and all of us, not this isn't like you, this is the greater you, myself included. That's how we put more oxygen on our own flame.
Yeah.
So it's not even about like necessarily obtaining all of it right now. So like all of the time that you want right now. I understand
Yeah.
just like a little bit more. I hear it.
Yeah.
It's also then being about what are you doing differently to get that even in the small incremental bits.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when I just in the very like simplified way of as we're talking in this conversation, when I say more time to myself, it's like right now I'm still in the phase where it's like hard to go to the bathroom alone. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
so forget, even doing my hair or putting makeup on. Like there are times where with the help of a screen I can get that done, or just if they're playing nicely for like 15 minutes I'll sneak upstairs, but like very soon after I'm going to hear the pitter patter of my shadows, and like if even if the door is closed and locked they are going to bang on it until it's like, okay, can we just get to like
So
a
okay,
point where they don't care that I'm in the bathroom?
that hasn't gone away yet. So I don't know
No.
if that's
No.
hasn't gone away. So
What is it?
I'll give a little bit of kind of personal anecdote here too. So
Gosh.
um so I am the financial breadwinner for our family.
Okay.
Um, we are homeschooling our kiddos, and I'm the
Mm,
primary responsibility for that.
wow.
Um, and my husband is a beautiful cook, and so kind of cooking is his domain, but the rest of the cleaning is mostly mine.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So why do I even say all that? I think, at some point, I was lamenting and saying we need to kind of shift these things. And it's not to say that you can't ask for help. So I'm not negating that.
Yeah.
However, I think it's important to understand like our whys about things. And I remember I had said something like that to my husband and saying that I didn't have time for myself. Like I really love to write and to do these things. And, he sort of had the audacity to tell me that I could wake up earlier.
Mm. Men love their audacity, let me tell
Right.
you.
And we co-sleep. And so like I'm with the kiddos. And so anyways, it's all,
Yeah, it's all on all the time.
it's on all the time. And those are my choices, right? And so
Yeah.
when he said that, my first pinch of like, oh, that's not a cool statement, man. However, I had to really stop and think. I was like, is there time? Again, I can justify for why I can tell myself I don't have time.
Mhm.
I'm filling it with all of these other things, and I can hold on to that anger and on that resentment, or I can take the emotionality out of what he said.
Mhm.
And do I have some more time? What would make me feel, what would light my own flame? What would fan my own fire?
Yeah.
How can I take my own responsibility? Right. So because we all want to point our finger. And again, this is not about not asking for help. That's not
I
my
know.
message.
Yeah. I know.
But it is also about taking our own personal responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easier to point the finger. It
It
is. I mean,
totally
it's
is,
just
right?
easier. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
still stung,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Totally. That audacity is the best word ever. Um, so but that's interesting though. I mean, I think that is a common trap or a common challenge that especially in new motherhood when you're used to this really well-oiled machine of a relationship and then you bring a human in and everything changes. That is a common challenge of looking outward first rather than inward. Are there any others that come to mind that you think are common, maybe pitfalls or challenges that you like to address or you think are important to address? Because I think those are the types of things really we don't prepare mothers for. It's
Yeah,
such a shock, all of it.
just a shock. Um, I think the other pitfall is to remember that your needs matter.
Yeah.
And I think especially kind of in this age of, attuned parenting, conscious parenting, however we want to lump that in
Mhm.
there. Somehow the message is then you have to be everything all the time at any time the kid asks for it.
Yeah, superwoman. Yeah.
Right? And no, that's not what that actually means, right? And
Yeah.
going back to, kind of your earlier talk about like your own upbringing of the message was different, right? The message was empowerment, the visual was traditional roles. Um, so the more that we can identify our needs, and again, that doesn't mean that then we get our needs met first. So it's not like, okay, like I matter more right now.
Yeah.
No, but you do matter,
Yeah.
and getting your needs met, yeah, it looks different as the needs, the immediate needs of our children change.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And I think that is touching on something you mentioned in the intake form. And you might have meant something different by it, but it's reminding me of it because, I ask for the listeners, I ask the guests to share aspects of their life, maybe that they feel like they are thriving in, and aspects where they are feeling like they're challenged right now. And I think that you shared that a challenge for you is certain aspects of trust and control. And
Mhm.
you might have meant something completely different by it, but I am connecting it to this because I think so often, especially moms, we want to ask for help, or we want to ask for our needs to be met, but then we get caught up in the trust and control aspect of what's happening with the kids in the house when we are off duty. And
Yeah.
that I can't speak so well to that because I have let it go. But if dad is on, if grandma's on, if nanny is on, I mean, there's certain things, right? We want to make sure everybody's safe and healthy. But beyond that, let it go.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so,
Yeah,
100% with you. And I've let that go. And I think if I remember kind of the question and how I responded, I was actually really talking about myself, like
I know
meaning
you
my
were.
own,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I
so
yeah. I'm
because,
reading the
yeah,
rest of it now, and you said trusting in the whole process of allowing,
yeah,
um, a deep resonance, which says to me, I won't read the rest of it. It was a long bit, but but
it
yeah,
was a lot.
I.
You said so much. I'm a
Yeah, no,
bit
no,
verbose,
no,
but
no. You did. I like the long answers, but yes, yes,
um,
yes,
but yeah, I mean, I think it does start with like the external letting of control, right? So it's even allowing our partner to kind of take over some certain things, and then even watching them do it drastically different than you would.
yeah,
And allowing it. And
yeah,
I mean, aside of, being safe and healthy, and allowing it. But
yeah.
then also for ourselves, it's, you know, and this is kind of just an offering is, I notice for myself, invite other people to do this too. It's like, when do you kind of demand control, meaning control of a situation with your kids is usually a good one. Like, when do you start like barking orders of like things to be cleaned up, or doing it now, or coming here, or right when you're more in a tense space, right? Like you're tightened.
Hmm.
And if you take an honest step back, it usually is because somewhere you're not either expressing like your real emotions about something, and it might not even be in that moment, but from previous, or feeling like some of your needs are not being met, whether
Yeah.
you can identify them or not.
Hmm. Yes. No one
Right?
will see your expression, but I saw it.
Right.
Maybe I'll get that in the video somehow.
Awesome. Very expressive.
Yeah. I also, now that I have refreshed myself on the entire answer of what you shared, I also recall why I kept it in my notes here is because something that I found while working on some, I'm trying to meditate, I'm trying to get into the manifesting thing, and like there is some part of me that always like I know that I have just organically throughout my life manifested without realizing it. But it's something that always struck me about learning more is the phrase of, the how is not my concern.
Not your job. Yeah.
That's so hard. That's so hard for me. Like And not just because I want to solve the how, but because I just like loop the thoughts of like, that's like, I'll be like, that's, I want this. And I'm like, well, that's impossible. I'm like, the how is not your concern.
No. But
Don't
see,
worry
that's
about
don't worry about it. And obviously way easier said than done. And again, I think this, especially for female, or not specifically female embodied, right? Like when we started to take on everything and not really give anything, this also seems part of in that wheelhouse, right? Like,
it.
okay, I've identified the problem. Now it's my job also to figure out how we're going to get
Yes.
there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's excellent. That I wouldn't have connected that. That's true because we have the evidence of every most other situations in our experience where that is what has to happen.
Mhm.
We figure out the problem and we deal with it.
And we solve it. And so I guess my offering is this, is that in part, not only do we need to let that go, but we also are then really limiting ourselves because then we're even narrowing
Yes.
it down to such a very specific way that we think it should go, because that's the
Yes.
only way we can see it.
Yeah.
And so if we then expand, so I like to think about focusing on our internal state of emotion. So let's say you do think about the goal and it's a specific thing, right? Don't change that,
Right.
and really start to include how you would feel in the having of that, in the doing of it.
Mhm.
Because really ultimately that is what you're going for, and we think that thing is going to give us that. It
Yes.
may, and it doesn't mean that you can't have those things or go for it. Absolutely, right? What
Yeah.
you really want though, or what that need is, it's that feeling, of creativity, of pride, of joy, of whatever,
Yes.
ease, comfort, freedom, clarity, whatever you want to put in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like my second show ever, I interviewed Chelsea Rife and I at the time had a my vision board behind me and we were talking about this and she's a manifestation coach and she was looking at it and she's like, "So your vision board, like I see a lot of material items on it and blah blah blah." And she's like, "That's fantastic." She goes, "But it's really what is the feeling you want in getting those things?" And that was like, "Okay, I need to know a whole new vision board now." Like, and it's
Thanks.
yeah, yeah, no, but it made sense, and then
Yeah.
to your point, I also was thinking about how as much as I have talked to people about this, the feeling that I was getting as the answer was coming out of your mouth and not immediately coming to my mind is like the sentiment of I still don't quite grasp it enough to explain it on my own. I
Okay.
can hear someone say it and go, "Yeah, I've heard that before." And yes, that makes sense, but if I was, like, completely out of context and someone asked me the question, you could answer it. But I would be like, "Oh, I know I've heard something about that before," and, like, if you can't explain it well enough, you don't understand it, and so I'm
Yeah.
like and so I'm there. That was, like that's a good clarification moment for me because sometimes I hear things enough where I think, "Oh, got it," and I'm like, "Mm,
Yep. Still
maybe
working on
not.
it.
Still working on it." Okay, so tell me a little bit about your offerings, your services, like how can someone work with you
Mhm.
and what do all those things look like? You have
Yeah.
the garden I saw. Are you offering that?
Yeah.
Like what are some of the
Yeah.
ways? Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes. Okay. Yeah. Connect, find me. One-on-one work, that's kind of the main way that I connect with people. I do hold short kind of 4-week containers with folks too. So that's that's the garden that you're talking about.
Okay.
Um and so that is a kind of a reserved space. Again, that's not any like diagnosable, let's say, if we want to speak in my professional lane of like, it's
Okay.
not going to be a diagnosed thing. It's not going to be something that you submit to your insurance, but it's just a container where
That's
you're
more
held with
coaching or kind of thing.
exactly coaching
Okay.
and like exactly supportive work. And it's limited to like 8 or 10 people. And we have themes that we talk about. And so then it's kind of more like a process and a reflection that we go through.
Okay.
Um, and I'm starting a YouTube channel.
Cool.
So yeah, and that, that intention is just that, it's the offerings of folks that maybe aren't financially have the financial freedom to work and to even do some of these group or one-on-one things, that it's a space where they can just get information or feel heard or and be seen. So
Cool. And your book, I
mhm.
was glancing at that. You want to tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about your book?
Sure, sure. You are the most perfectly perfect you, reclaiming self-love. Yeah, so you can get it on Amazon or on my website as well. And it's a very kind of short, digestible little piece of work. That is essentially just saying, hey, you matter, right? You matter to put some time and effort into yourself. And you're not doing it wrong. And you're not doing it, you're not doing it wrong. That's really it's this little book that's holding you in grace and love and light, to remind you to to give some oxygen to your flame.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Laura, is there anything based on our conversation today that's still sort of lingering on your heart, mind, or soul, or anything you want to leave people with today?
No, I'll wrap it up and just say, be kind to yourself,
Mm,
love yourself, and you matter. You matter to do those things.
okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was so nice talking to you, and I appreciate you.
Absolutely, likewise.
All right. So I think the part of this conversation that I personally need to remind myself of is when Dr. Laura was talking about how challenging it is for mothers to identify their needs and find ways to meet them. The big message here is that we have to first recognize that our needs matter. That's an essential key component to this process. And that it's not about being everything all the time. Take off the superwoman cape, the magic wand, like take it all away. You're not meant to be superhuman. You're not meant to do everything all the time. I also thought it was important to remind for myself as well that trust and control are common issues in motherhood, in both allowing others to help with childcare and in letting go of certain aspects of parenting, like dad or your husband is going to help out, but he does things a little bit differently. And we really just have to learn to let go. I've let go of a lot in that realm. And at the end of the day, everybody's happy, everybody's alive, everybody's fed, everybody's dressed. It's all okay. It's all okay. The benefit of me having time to myself or time away or with friends outweighs the fact that, you know, my daughter might come downstairs with a ponytail that looks like a first grader did it, or clothes that don't match, or they've had French fries and chicken nuggets for the 45th day in a row. Like they're fed and they're dressed and they're having a great time. And that's enough for me. And the part that I particularly enjoyed about this conversation was the focus on vibrancy rather than the feeling of a loss. So we talk about losing ourselves in motherhood. And rather than approaching it from that point of view of, hey, I've lost myself, how do I get myself back? Dr. Laura really works to remind us that you are always a flame. There is always a flame. And sometimes it's just a little bit more burnt out than others. And sometimes it is a thriving flame and it's all okay. But what I'm really just like loving that there's always a flame. You're not like totally lost or gone. There's always a flame. And we just have to learn how to reignite it, especially through the transition into motherhood. So I really love that. Thank you, Dr. Laura, for your time and everything that you're doing in this world. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.